The problem is that we are yet to make our people understand the real meaning of corruption, because for them, they think corruption is giving a bribe or taking a bribe. That is how little we look, how small we look of corruption. But as a matter of fact, corruption is the cancer that has killed us and is burying us. It is not just now. It is not just about this march to parliament that corruption is coming on the forefront, but corruption has been, the way of life. In fact, the way of death in Uganda for the last close to 40 years since General Museveni took power. We have been raised in corruption, only that it gets worse and worse and worse every day. It started with bribing and taking bribes, then it went to embezzlement, then to bro-light theft. Now it is in looting levels. It's all brought by the sense of impunity, the idea of zero accountability to anybody. That's, beginning from the moral corruption, where leaders behave in whatever way they want, to political corruption, where you find people get votes being stolen, elections being rigged with impunity, people being shot and dead, unarmed civilians protesting, giving or taking bribes by the most respected people, including religious leaders. So this has been a way of life, although, of course, under General Museveni, scandals have become much worse. You won't mention a month that went scandal-free, not only in Parliament, everywhere. I'm only glad that the intellectuals of now are rising up. As a matter of fact, when I was in the ghetto somewhere talking to ghetto youths, they were, indifferent, wondering whether the elite of this world have only woken up to the corruption that is ongoing, not only the looting of public funds in Parliament or in other public offices, but even the moral corruption, a situation where people are picked, taken, and they disappear. And common people have always had the feeling of fighting and struggling alone. I'm only glad that eventually it's touching everywhere, and eventually people are rising up, especially young people, especially landed people, people on X here, on Twitter, educated people, knowledgeable people. And I'm even glad that it's cutting across. It is tribeless, it is partyless, and of course it's genderless and ageless.
Do you feel challenged that the Gen Z has rather chosen to take action?
I feel challenged, and it's a good thing. We should all be challenged. But I'm comforted by the words of Frantz Fanon, who said, every generation must discover its mission and then pursue it or betray it. It feels like this generation, a generation of Gen Zs, has discovered its mission, or rather led the mission, because it's supposed to be a mission of all people, from the baby boomers to the Gen Zs and even the generations to follow. It's a challenge that the younger people have taken it a notch higher to action. Our generation has been just speakers, but at least we've spoken about it. Of course, a few of us dared to take a step, but it takes multiple people. I'm just glad that this generation has approached it from a different perspective altogether. I hope they're not silenced. We try to take action, we continue to try to take action, but the resistance we get is the vulgarization of the cause and reducing it to politics. When one talks about corruption, the regime, all those that are beneficiaries of corruption are quick to reduce it to blackmail, to reduce it to politics. But and they always many times get their way, because the people that are talking about it are the people that have either run for office or are running for office. So it is easy to twist it and say, these are politicians seeking for their own interests. But now that young people that are clearly not seeking office or seeking any position of responsibility, but just feeling the pain and rising to the occasion, is another thing altogether.
As the leading opposition leader, and in terms and the team you lead, have you experienced any corruption? And if yes, how have you dealt with it? And what is the political cost of dealing with it?
I think the world has seen in recent times that corruption has cut across, including our own group that I lead. Yes, you have had some unsubstantiated claims, but also you've seen clear cases of corruption where one of our own, our former leader of opposition, got involved in a corruption scandal. It was very painful, but as a leader, I had to take a firm stand, and I'm very glad that the party stood along our values and we took action. Of course, yes, it comes with political costs. First, because corruption is the currency now, corruption is the fuel that is enabling those that rule over us to hold on to power. It is the exchange rate that people have to pay to stay in office. You know, we were disempowered. As a party, we appoint we second somebody to go to the commission, and therefore, by virtue of the law, he who appoints can disappoint. However, this time we were disempowered and we could not recall the person that was involved in this corruption scandal. We could not recall them from the commission, even though we wanted. And this has been a benefit that has been given to the regime, by the regime, to all those people that have gone against our values. But not only that, corruption, like Honorable Senyonyi always says, when you fight corruption, corruption fights back. And corruption has gone as far deep as respected institutions. You will note that recently a few of our colleagues actually even tried to use the church and even our traditional institutions to cover corruption. Unfortunately, some people buy into it because here we're talking about money, and money corrupts even the most moral people. So we had to take a lot of precious time that we would have used to sensitize our people to free themselves, but we had to pause and then first make it clear that it is indeed corruption, and we are trying to ensure that we have integrity before we claim to give integrity to the people. So yeah, it has been a cost, a huge political cost, but it's worth it if we have to be leaders worth our salt.
I like that you mentioned that the leader of opposition, Right Honorable Joe Sonyanyi, recently said, when you fight corruption, it certainly will fight back. Mr. President, given the country we are in, where the majority of us are actually poor, do we have what it takes to fight back when corruption fights back to us?
Yes, you do. You have what it takes. Your morality, your integrity. You have what it takes. You only need to make that firm choice. It's a costly choice because it comes with intimidation, it comes with brokenness, but at the end of the day, it comes with pride that does not equate to anything. So I want to encourage you and all other young people that you have what it takes to fight that corruption, because it can be fought and it can be defeated.
Mr. President, given what we've known about General Museveni, he aids and abates all wrongs. He's diametrically, he has been diametrically opposed to the position he has been taking. For example, in 1986, he said, the problem of Africa and in Uganda in particular is leaders that overstay in power. And he has overstayed in power. He has been coming out to condemn corruption, but again condone it. Why do you think Museveni has been adamant to act against corruption, Mr. President?
On a platform like this, I'm trying to be as diplomatic as possible. But again, because I'm talking to young people, I want to be as blunt and as honest as possible.
Mr. President, we have always known you for being a realistic person.
Yeah,
so we hope you
I believe that what stops General Museveni from practically fighting corruption is because he is corrupt himself. he was corrupted with power. There's this famous saying that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. General Museveni has absolute power, and that absolute power corrupted him absolutely. He cannot fight corruption because corruption is his biggest tool of control. He will pay lip service to the fight against corruption, but he will not fight corruption because it is corruption that is keeping him in power. It is the abuse of the law, which is corruption, that is keeping him in power. It is the rewardism, policy that he has, where even the most corrupt people, for as long as they can serve his purpose, he will keep them in office. I mean, look at Anita Among, a person that is not even politically smart, that she gives herself out every time. She has confessed to looting public funds numerous times, but she
But
continues to wield power. You've seen Mike Mukula, you've seen Jim Owezi, and many others. Corruption is what General Museveni uses. As a matter of fact, he has also said it numerous times that Anita Among helps him buy off opposition leaders to his side. So that still, will show you that General Museveni is not going to fight corruption. You've heard Mulyagonja, the former IGG, who said most corruption scandals are traced to General Museveni's footprint. I mean, doorstep. I was talking about the numerous scandals that you've seen, the Global Fund scandal of Jim Owezi and Mike Mukula, up to the tune of 1.4 trillion was lost in between there. Nothing happened to them. They were instead rewarded. You remember the story of the junk helicopters in 1997, 45.4 billion lost, but because Salim Saleh helps him control the military, he ended there. It ended that way. The pension scam of 2010, you remember the likes of Jimero Amafa. You remember the Chogam scandal, including Sam Kutesa, his brother-in-law, or something like that, including Gilbert Bukenya, including the likes of Nasasira. But because these people have always been his anchor in the population, you've had the scandals in the office of the Prime Minister. You've had the Validam scandal. You've had NSSF Temangalo scandal. You've had scandal after scandal. But this is Uganda's way of life, in fact, way of death. So General Museveni has no will whatsoever to fight corruption because it's his tool.
But Honorable Chagulanyi, you speak of Museveni, who recently, opened up an anti-corruption unit at URA. He has the IGG, he has the State House anti-corruption unity. He had the anti-corruption work. Don't you think he's willing to fight
before you
corruption?
even go on with all the institutions or pseudo institutions that he sets up, these are actually also windows of theft. I mean, you tell me that you are setting up a new anti-corruption unit to oversee the Uganda Revenue Authority, which loses 10 trillion every year, 10 trillion of our money, But again, the person in charge of that unit is it David Karemera, the same person that was convicted, is a convicted tax fraudster. He's a convicted thief. But now you appoint a thief to ensure that nobody steals. It is a joke. It is an absolute joke.
I think Mr. Museveni is playing the game of set a thief to catch a thief. President BOBI Wine, please speak about the cynicism from some influential people about the fight against corruption.
You see, you're throwing about words extravagantly. For example, you're calling them influential. They don't influence us. They don't influence
Looking
us
at
because we no longer follow them. Yes, there's been a lot of cynicism, and that is guilt talk. That is guilt talk from these corrupt members of parliament, corrupt leaders, including religious and traditional leaders. They know the truth, but because they are corrupt. And you see the corrupt people always know which kind of engine to grease. So they keep fueling that engine. No wonder corrupt people will steal money and go build churches. Today, a church was being launched by Thomas Kaebwa, the same person who is under question. So you won't fail to hoodwink a few people. Radio presenters, TV presenters, so-called analysts, those armchair analysts, they will speak very good English, quote very smart laws in defense of corruption. Of course, ultimately, it fails that they have to deploy brute force to protect corruption. But all that cynicism is meant to do what young people these days call. I was saying that the people that are trying to be cynical are trying to do what the young people of these days call gaslighting. They're trying to make the people that are speaking up against corruption have a false sense of wrongness. They're trying to make them believe that they actually don't understand what they're talking about. That is the level of intellectual dishonesty that is being employed to defend corruption.
President, help us understand, what is NUP's policy about corruption or on corruption?
NUP's policy, like most political parties, I really don't want to talk about what we write or what we say. I want to talk about what we do. Of course, I will tell you that we have a zero tolerance policy to corruption, but that will only be words until we act on it. The NRM and all other political parties speak, very morally until it's time to act. For us, we don't only speak about it, but we act with the little power that we have. And if we are to get more power, then you will see what moral people use power for. Of course, moral actions.